Story 1. I used to date this guy, total abusive AH. But he and his friends used an Ouija board. They said they were talking to a demon named Zozo, which is pretty popular, and that Zozo had promised to pay them all a visit in the week. But since there were only 5 of them, 2 of them would get 2 visits. Well, my ex got his. He couldn't remember it, but his family was confused as to why he was acting all aggressive, throwing stuff and cursing and just overall being a really heated jerk. H was like that for the whole day, but by the time the next day rolled around, he couldn't remember anything. Friend 1 in his group had a dog, and the whole time, they said their dog kept staring at a corner of the room that looked darker than the rest of the room, and that the dog growled and even snapped at the corner. Friend 1 felt like something was watching him the whole night. They were all in high school, and he was so scared that even as a high schooler, he hid under his covers to give him just the tiniest amount of relief. The next friend 2, said that their doors kept opening, lights that were on turned off, footsteps stomping around the outside of his room at night, etc. The part that freaked him out the most was that he heard scratching from the other side of the door. He thought maybe because he had a cross in his room, he was safe. I think friend 3 got possessed twice in the week because I was told her didn't go to school that week or the next. My ex was lucky and didn't have 2 visits from Zozo, but just hearing it really freaked me out. As someone who doesn't touch the Ouija board or even really talk about it, if I ever touched it, my mom would disown me and kick me out. My whole family is highly against this board. I was very tempted to break up with him. After he told me that story, I had a nightmare, and when I woke up, had sleep paralysis. I was horrified for the whole night. I had only been dating him for 3-ish months at that point, so I didn't think it was a big deal. The next day, I was so tired, paranoid, and scared, I told him I wanted to break up and was dead set on it. Somehow, he managed to get me to stay, which ended up being a 2-year relationship. But if I ever met someone who touched that board again, I would most likely cut ties with them right then and there. In case you're wondering what happened in my sleep paralysis, I was frozen to my bed. I couldn't even close my eyes. In one corner was a man with horns, but I could only see his silhouette. In another corner was a taller man, completely black. A dark abyss black. In the third corner was this witch-looking figure. Frizzled, messy hair, a long gown, and her face was covered. She was doing this really creepy walk that freaked me out. Like she was dislocating her neck and shoulder at once, then putting it back in every step, only to take it off and dislocate it the next. Even thinking about it scares me. I've never been so scared in my life. Horrified, tears in my eyes until that night. The board is no joke. No one should be playing it. Story 2. One Saturday night in 1997, at a cool dad's house of my friend Amanda, a very fun group of my teenage friends, 8 of us, were playing Ouija board in groups of 4, taking turns and watching what we thought was just a silly rite of passage for us to take place. We were having a blast, lightly drinking underage and smoking weed. It was late when the super freaky stuff started to happen. We were all wide awake because the game took weird turns, and I remember seeing 2:22 a.m. because I looked over at my friend's family VCR and it displayed the time. That's when one of the guys, Ryan the smartass, asked who in the room would be the first to die and how. I was watching and witnessing this. My hand was not on the planchette. I remember that we all were like, dude, why? The planchette moved to the letter U and stopped. Ryan laughed and said, okay, how? The planchette moved to spell out CARCRAS. And that's when my friend Amanda, whose house it was, said, okay, we are done now, and proceeded to turn on the lights and blow out candles near her. Ryan was the only one still sitting there staring at the board, sorta half laughing, but also sorta freaked out. I watched him space out for a moment and thought I was maybe too high, but I wasn't, 'cause we all sorta stopped smoking around 2 a.m. 'cause weird shit, and it was a very strange feeling at the time. We all went outside and laid in the summer grass, and somewhere in that moment, some of us fell asleep outside or wandered back inside to crash. Smash cut to about 3 months later, Ryan dies in a car wreck near our high school. It happened on a Saturday night, driving back home with his girlfriend. She survived, after a movie. Didn't see the semi-truck on a curve as he pulled out of a side road to turn onto the main road back into town. Still gives me chills. Other shit happened that night. Candles would not stay lit on a warm, calm summer night inside a house with the AC off and windows open. But we all were freaked out about Ryan and probably still are to this day. Yes, he was a smartass, but still, the spaced out look he had right afterwards made me think he wasn't moving the planchette around that time. Story 3. This happened in college, mid-80s. Best friend, who was not yet then my roommate, and I got to playing around with a homemade Ouija. D and I made it out of basic notebook paper with a straw as a planchette. Broke college days, such fun. We got in touch with two spirits who claimed to be from W. Taward, Jonathan and Wade. Being the dumb college kids we were, we begged them to send us a sign. They didn't want to, said it would cost a lot of energy and might open a door to other less good spirits. No, we said. Send us a sign. We log off, go to sleep, wake up, go out, run errands. Return to dorm room. Message light is blinking on, now antique, answering machine. Scroll through. One message in the middle is Wade. Loves, Katie. We knew no Wades. No one in Dee's family, in my family, is named Wade. We had no friends, professors, fellow students named Wade. And so we proceeded to freak right out, replayed it, kept freaking out. OMG, this must be their sign. Then had the bright idea to bring over our best male buddy and let him hear it. He lived across the way in the boys' dorms. Dee and I run downstairs. She runs and gets Jay. We run back upstairs. Message light still blinking. We go to play the messages and that particular message in the middle is gone. Never came back. Cue more freaking out. Cue a stern warning from Jay about messing with Ouija boards. Dee and I kept doing it, but I noticed my hands going cold all the way up to my elbows. I felt drained, no energy. Then one weekend, my roommate went home. I went out, returned home around dusk. Walked in, and the dorm was freezing cold. In May, in the deep south. I walked in and saw at the window a giant hand that knocked 3 times. Through the glass, we lived on the 3rd floor. I took one giant step back, said nothing, thought nothing. Turned off the light, locked the door, ran down to Dee's dorm room. Cue more freaking out. I told Dee I'm spending the night here even if I have to sleep on the floor. We relaxed, then I suddenly realized, crap, I need my contact solution and clothes. We have to go back. Dee said give it an hour or 2 more, so we did. Went back in. Room was completely normal. No heaviness, no freezing temps. Dee and I ripped up the homemade Ouija board, clipped the straw planchette into pieces, never did it again. I know what I saw. I saw a giant hand knocking on my window through the glass. It moved the window blinds on the inside. And we lived on the 3rd floor. Something wanted in. Never again. Story 4. I haven't had many scary experiences, but definitely the most insane one was my 2nd time ever using it. It was my last day of the semester before I move out of my very old prison-like dorm. My roommate, who was also a HS friend and a female friend of mine, hung out and used my roommate's board. This is the first and only time I've used a board with a mix of genders, and I've heard that adds power to the board. We talked to a few spirits, but they were quite weak and bland with the responses. Then comes the spirit who identified itself as NZN. NZN claimed to be a Crip and died in a gang fight and was in Boston looking for his aunt. It took a liking to my roommate since it reminded him of a friend when he was alive. NZN would say my roommate's nickname every once in a while in between questions. This spirit seemed to have a significant more amount of power compared to others, and the planchette moved a lot quicker and stronger than all the ones before. It also lasted a lot longer than any other sessions. Now to the freaky part. A little context, my first name is Hayden. After asking enough questions to get a good idea of Enzin's story and stuff, I decided to ask where they were in the room. It responded with my roommate's name and then my other friend's nickname that it came up for her, T. I then said, so right here? And stuck my hand in between them and wiggled it around a bit, and the planchette flew out of our hands to no. It then started to spell out Y, and I started to get a bit nervous since I didn't introduce my name, and neither did my friends. It finished with sack. It started spelling haysack over and over again, and when I asked if it was me, it immediately went to yes. It then proceeded to do all the classic red flags with a board, and we would scold it to stop, and it would stop only to call me haysack. Again, then resume counting 0 to 9 or Z to A or to the corners of the board. Each time we basically yelled at it like a dog, and eventually forced a goodbye on it. Enzen then continued to pop up in almost every other session we had during that day. The moment it identified itself as NZN, we forced a goodbye until the last time we asked if it would cooperate and not try any funny business, which it agreed to, and after a bit of conversing it promises it would keep my roommate company until they moved out. I left a week early due to transferring out of the college. That was probably the scariest moment I had with a board, but I had another freaky one that was more just kinda solid proof versus scary. A group of friends and I went urban exploring at a massive abandoned mental hospital that has a bit of a rocky history. One of those friends was my old roommate mentioned before, so they brought their board with them. After a bit of wandering, we found a wooden, narrow and steep staircase that led to a subterranean level of the building and discovered some meat lockers. Our bright minds decided to use the board in one of the lockers with the big metal door almost closed. After a few attempts at getting some contact, things just felt really weak and disconnected. So, a few of my friends who were spectators and also filming decided to leave and explore elsewhere. When my friend with the camera went up the staircase, the microphone got a bunch of disturbance and stopped the moment he left the staircase. This roughly lined up to me, and two other friends who stayed back with the board attempt our last contact before packing up and received a very weak signal. The planchette moved at the speed of molasses, and to test the board, we asked how many people were above us since we knew how many went up. And we heard them up there too. The people on the board heard the footsteps and a dragging noise that we identified it afterwards as a fire hose. The board went right over the correct number to 0. Knowing the board was incorrect, we gave up and packed everything up. When we got up the stairs, we found the room empty of people and our friends in a completely separate building. After asking them when they left, because we heard noises above us for a bit and they said they were messing around with the hose when one of them wandered out of the building and toward another one and the others swiftly dropped the hose and followed. That meant the board was technically correct, and there was no way any of the people using the board could have known, so it couldn't have been faked. That was one of the sessions I really solidified my belief the Ouija board, as uneventful as it was compared to other times. Story 5. Not me, but an ex I used to date. She told me the story of when she was in the 6th grade. She and her friends were interested in the occult and witchcraft. They wanted to imitate the characters on the TV show Charmed. One of her friends even claimed to have been born with her third eye open, so she saw things that weren't there. She was their designated medium, and she was regarded as the most experienced among them. They all went to a Catholic girls' school, and during one of the school-wide masses that every student had to be present for, it was some holy day on a Friday at noon, they snuck back to their empty classroom one by one to perform a simpler version of the Ouija board, known as summoning the spirit of the glass-chalked coin, where you draw a makeshift Ouija board out of paper and ink and use either a coin or drinking glass. Some of them thought that to perform the ritual correctly, they had to do it on an auspicious day. Fridays, Sundays, Mondays, holy days, etc. Then, they had to recite the Lord's Prayer and the Apostles' Creed backwards. Don't know how. Not long after they started, almost immediately, they summoned someone, something. They all swear the drinking glass they used started moving on its own, and whatever they summoned answered questions aggressively. The one leading the ritual was their supernaturally attuned friend, who was also asking the questions. At some point, they asked one of the big questions: what will happen in the future? Whatever they summoned answered them, one of you will die. They asked, who? It said the name of their medium friend. They asked, how? It said, I will kill you. At that instant, the glass shattered simultaneously as lightning struck a tree branch close to the windows outside their classroom. The lights in the room were flickering on and off, and a strong wind out of nowhere blew the windows and doors of the classroom open in a maelstrom, which they locked and closed for privacy. They all freaked out and ran out of the hell breaking loose in their classroom. All of them, except their medium friend, who looked like she was in a catatonic trance, and they left behind in the eye of the raging chaos they summoned. When they were found by their teachers and classmates, they all felt nauseous and unwell after their experience. Their parents were called, and they all were suspended for a while. They tried to ask what their friend saw or experienced while she was catatonic. She would get distraught and would just keep saying she either didn't remember or she refused to speak of it. They all recovered with seemingly no ill effects except for their medium friend, who was expelled and was never heard from again. They supposedly stopped dabbling in the occult after that. Needless to say, I was freaked out just listening to her tale at the time. Something in the haunted look she had in her eyes and the sincerity with which she told her story convinced me she was telling the truth, or what she thought really happened.